Standing by my bed, she left her belongings behind and drew me closer. It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening that felt like the world had paused for a moment. The sky outside the window had a soft orange glow as the sun slowly sank behind the distant hills. Inside, the small apartment was filled with the gentle hum of the ceiling fan, and the faint smell of coffee lingered from earlier in the day. The protagonist sat on the edge of the bed, a book resting loosely in his hands, though he wasn't really reading. His mind wandered, tracing back to small moments of the day, the sound of children playing in the street, the friendly nod of a neighbor, the soft chirping of birds returning home. It was ordinary, peaceful, almost too calm. He had been alone most of the day, enjoying the quiet, but there was a subtle emptiness he couldn't quite name. It was not sadness exactly, just a feeling that something, or someone, was missing. He had grown used to his solitude over the years, filling his time with books, music, and occasional calls with friends. Still, there were moments like this when the silence seemed almost too heavy, pressing against him like a gentle, unspoken question. What if life had more waiting just beyond his reach? As he sat there, staring absent-mindedly at the small clock on the nightstand, there was a soft knock on the door. It was unexpected, almost timid, but there was a rhythm to it that suggested urgency mingled with hesitation.
He wasn't expecting anyone. No friends, no family. And the hours were late enough that most people were already at home, enjoying their evenings in peace.
He set the book down and walked slowly to the door, his curiosity growing with each step. When he opened it, she was there. She stood in the dim hallway, a small bag slung over her shoulder, looking slightly weary but somehow at ease. There was something familiar in her eyes, a quiet recognition that tugged at the corners of his memory. He blinked, unsure if he should speak first, if this was a dream, a memory, or simply someone from the past whose presence he had not expected. She smiled, a small, soft smile that seemed to carry 1,000 unspoken words, and in that moment, the room felt lighter, as if the air itself had changed. "Can I come in?" she asked gently, her voice low but steady, carrying a warmth that immediately put him at ease. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She moved carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. Yet she carried herself with a quiet confidence. She placed her bag down on the floor near the corner, but instead of stepping back or waiting, she took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them. Her eyes searched his face, not with demand or expectation, but with a familiarity that was almost magnetic. He felt a sudden, unexpected pull, an emotional tug that made his chest tighten slightly. He didn't know why he felt this way, but he realized that he had seen her before, long ago, in moments that were etched into memory, without him realizing it. Perhaps it had been in passing, perhaps in small gestures that now seemed monumental. There was a connection, subtle and quiet, that neither of them had acknowledged until now. Noticing the small details, the photographs on the wall, the worn edges of the rug, the little lamp on the nightstand that cast soft shadows across the bed, she didn't comment, didn't ask questions. Instead, she took another step closer, her presence filling the space, not with words, but with a kind of quiet, magnetic energy. "I hope it's all right," she said softly, almost as if reading his mind. "I didn't want to wait outside. I thought maybe this was the right place to be." He nodded, still processing the strange intensity of the moment. There was something in her tone, something in the way she had arrived unannounced, that made him feel both nervous and strangely comfortable at the same time. He wanted to ask questions, wanted to understand why she was here, but the words felt heavy in his throat. Instead, he simply gestured toward the bed, a silent invitation for her to stay if she wished. She did not hesitate. She stepped closer, her movements deliberate and unhurried, and placed her bag gently on the floor. But it wasn't just the act of leaving her belongings behind that caught his attention. It was the trust, the vulnerability, and the quiet insistence that she had chosen to be there, in that moment, with him. The air between them seemed to hum softly, a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted, even if neither of them fully understood how. As she settled herself in the room, he finally found his voice. "It's ba-da-da-da-da." "Good to see you," he said, his words feeling inadequate for the depth of the moment. She smiled again, and it was different this time. Warmer, lighter, more personal. "It's good to be here," she replied. "I think I needed to come." There was a silence that followed, but it was not empty. It was filled with possibility, with the unspoken acknowledgement that life sometimes brings people together in the most unexpected ways. The protagonist sat back on the bed, his hands resting loosely on his knees, and studied her quietly. There was a calmness to her presence, a kind of gentle assurance that made him feel grounded even in the midst of his swirling thoughts. For a moment he allowed himself to just watch her, to notice the way her eyes caught the light from the lamp, the way her hair fell softly across her shoulders, the subtle movements that seemed to carry stories of their own. He realized that he had missed this, whatever this was. Perhaps it was companionship. Perhaps it was the reminder that connection could appear suddenly, without warning, and still feel like it had always belonged.
He looked around the room again, not critically, but with a quiet curiosity.
Then, almost instinctively, she moved a little closer to him. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight that was unmistakable. He felt the pull again, not physical, not in the sense of closeness alone, but emotional, as if her presence had created a bridge between their worlds that had always existed, but had gone unnoticed until now.
"Do you remember?" She began, hesitating, then shaking her head with a faint laugh.
"Never mind, it's silly." He tilted his head, curious. "Try me, I might remember too." She paused, considering, then smiled softly.
"Some things are better felt than remembered,"
she said finally, her words gentle, almost poetic. "But I think you'd understand." He nodded slowly, sensing the depth behind her words even if he didn't fully grasp the meaning yet. There was an understanding between them, silent but real, that didn't need explanation. It was in the way she had arrived, in the way she had left her belongings behind, in the way she had drawn him closer without a single demand. The evening stretched on, not with the rush of conversation or the need to fill the silence, but with quiet presence. They didn't speak much, yet every glance, every subtle movement, seemed to carry volumes. He realized that life had a way of placing moments like these in unexpected places. Moments that felt small at first, but left an impact that lingered long after the moment had passed. Eventually, she leaned back slightly, her expression soft and thoughtful.
"I think I needed this," she said, almost to herself.
"Just to be here for a little while." He nodded again, feeling a strange warmth spreading through him. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of feelings inside him. It feels right, somehow." She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need words to convey its meaning. In that simple gesture, he understood that her presence wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a choice, a declaration of trust, and a reminder that connections could surprise us when we least expected them. The night grew darker, the orange glow outside the window fading into deep shades of blue and purple. Yet inside, the room felt alive with a quiet energy, soft, tender, and full of unspoken promise. For the protagonist, it was the beginning of something new, though he didn't yet know what form it would take. All he knew was that the evening had changed, that a simple act of arrival had opened a door he hadn't realized was there, and that for the first time in a long while, He felt the possibility of warmth, closeness, and understanding in a way that touched the heart, and as he watched her settle in, as she let herself be present without fear or hesitation, he realized that sometimes life's most significant moments are not the ones we plan or expect. They are the moments that arrive quietly, carrying with them the power to shift everything. And all we need to do is be willing to notice, to feel, and to embrace them. The room settled into a quiet rhythm as the evening deepened. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, and the faint glow of streetlights began to flicker on, casting gentle patterns on the walls. Inside, the air felt alive with a different kind of movement, the subtle energy of two people reconnecting, discovering the threads of a past that had been quietly waiting to resurface. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes occasionally drifting to the small details around her. There were tiny, familiar signs that told her she was in a place of comfort, even though she had never truly been here before. The books stacked neatly on the shelf, the faint smell of tea from earlier, the soft hum of the ceiling fan. It all spoke of a life quietly lived, carefully observed. Yet what drew her most was not the room, but the person sitting across from her, who now felt closer than the walls themselves.
Do you ever think about the past? She asked quietly, breaking the silence.
Her voice was soft, almost tentative, as if she were testing the waters before diving in. He looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. Sometimes, he replied, his tone thoughtful. Not always the big events, but the small ones, the things that pass by, almost unnoticed, but somehow stay with you. Her eyes brightened slightly and she nodded. Exactly. Those little moments, they have a way of coming back when you least expect them. She paused, then laughed softly, a sound that felt like a warm breeze. I remember something silly from years ago. You probably won't even recall it.
He leaned forward, curiosity piqued. Try me. I might surprise you.
She smiled, her eyes reflecting a mixture of nostalgia and amusement.
You always left your books open at the same page as if someone could just pick them up and continue reading.
Even when you moved on to another book, the pages stayed open. I used to think maybe you were leaving a piece of yourself behind for someone to find. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. I don't remember doing that, he admitted. But it doesn't surprise me that you noticed. You always notice things most people overlook. Her smile softened, and there was a brief silence between them. It was not awkward. It was filled with understanding, the kind that comes from years of observing someone quietly from afar, from recognizing details others never see. I missed this, she said after a moment, almost whispering. Just sitting, talking, being near someone who understands, even without words. He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. There was a strange, comforting honesty in her presence, a vulnerability that invited trust without demanding it. I've missed it too, he replied.
Even if I didn't realize it until now. She glanced down at the bag she had left on the floor earlier. I didn't want to carry my worries outside anymore, she said softly.
Sometimes it feels easier to just put them down somewhere safe and let someone see you as you are. He studied her, noticing the subtle tension in her shoulders, the faint shadow of fatigue under her eyes, and the quiet strength in the way she held herself. You can leave them here, he said gently.
If you want, you can leave them with me. Not everything, of course, but the pieces you don't need to carry alone.
Her eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a connection that needed no words. She nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible movement that carried immense meaning. It was a gesture of trust, a quiet acknowledgement that she had chosen to be vulnerable in his presence. They talked for hours, though it never felt like time passed at all. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from shared memories to hopes, fears, and the small details of everyday life that often go unnoticed. She spoke of the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the unexpected joys that had shaped her journey. He listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply letting her speak, understanding that the act of listening itself was a form of closeness. At one point she laughed, a clear, unrestrained sound that filled the room with warmth. "Do you remember the time we tried to climb that small hill near the river?" she asked. "We thought it was impossible, but we kept going, laughing the entire way. We were so convinced we'd fail, but we made it to the top." He smiled, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. "I do remember. And I remember looking at you at the top thinking, you make the impossible feel possible." She laughed again, but this time it was softer, almost shy. "I think that day taught me something important. That fear isn't always a reason to stop. Sometimes it's a reason to keep going, especially if someone is by your side."
He nodded, feeling the truth in her words.
There was a simplicity in her observations that carried profound meaning, a reminder that life's most significant lessons often come from ordinary moments shared with others. As the night deepened, they grew more comfortable in each other's presence. She moved closer, not forcefully but naturally, as if the space between them had always been meant to shrink. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he was missing. It was not romantic, not in the sense of expectation, but it was an intimacy that went beyond words, a connection of souls recognizing each other after years of silent distance. At one point, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open to a page filled with careful handwriting. "I write things down," she explained softly. "Thoughts, dreams, memories. It helps me make sense of the world." He leaned in, curious. The notebook contained sketches, small notes, and observations, moments captured in a way that only someone paying close attention could understand. "These are beautiful," he said quietly.
They show so much of who you are. She smiled, a little self-conscious but pleased. I thought maybe you might understand.
Ooh. You've always had a way of seeing things that others miss.
He nodded, feeling the sincerity in her words.
"I do understand," he said, "and I think that's why you're here now. Not just for comfort, but because you trust me to see you as you are." Her eyes glistened slightly and she looked away for a moment, taking a slow breath.
I do trust you, she admitted softly, more than I've trusted anyone in a long time. The weight of her words hung in the room, not heavy, but meaningful.
He felt a mix of gratitude and quiet responsibility, understanding that trust is a delicate gift, one that requires care and respect. He reached out, lightly touching the edge of her hand, a gesture of reassurance, of mutual understanding. She didn't pull away, instead she allowed the touch, small and simple, to affirm the bond forming between them. They spoke of dreams as well, the ones that seemed distant or impossible, the ones that had been quietly nurtured in the corners of their hearts. She told him about her hopes for the future, the things she wanted to accomplish, and the fears that often held her back. He shared his own thoughts, moments of doubt, and the quiet ambitions he had never voiced aloud. Each revelation was a thread, weaving them closer together, creating a tapestry of shared understanding. There were moments of silence too, comfortable silences that did not feel empty. Sometimes they would simply sit, looking at each other, or staring out the window at the city lights below. In those moments, words were unnecessary. The presence itself was enough. A quiet acknowledgement that life had brought them to this place, at this time, for a reason that was not yet fully understood. She leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. "I think I needed this more than I realized," she said softly. "I think that it just to be near someone who sees the small things, who notices the little gestures and understands their meaning." He nodded, feeling the resonance of her words. "And I think I needed you to come here," he replied. even if I didn't know it until this moment. As the night wore on, the conversation deepened. They shared personal stories, moments of vulnerability, and quiet joys that had remained hidden from the world. She spoke of challenges she had faced alone, the moments when she had felt uncertain, and the small victories that had carried her forward. He listened, sometimes offering encouragement, sometimes simply absorbing the stories, understanding that the act of listening was itself a form of intimacy. By the time the clock indicated it was late, neither of them felt the passage of hours. The room was filled with a gentle warmth, a soft glow that seemed to come not from the lamp, but from the presence of two people who had found a rare and meaningful connection. She had left her belongings behind, yes, but she had also left a piece of herself, her trust, her stories, her vulnerability.
And he had accepted them, not with judgment or hesitation, but with quiet understanding and respect.
In that room, on that quiet night, something profound had shifted. It was not dramatic, not marked by grand gestures or declarations, but in its simplicity, it was powerful. A bond had been recognized, nurtured by patience, understanding, and the shared experience of being fully seen. And as she finally leaned back against the bed, closing her eyes for a brief moment of rest, he realized that this was only the beginning. There would be more stories to share, more moments to experience, and more of life to explore together. But for now, in the stillness of the night, they simply existed in each other's presence, connected by trust, memory, and the quiet magic of understanding. The first light of morning seeped gently through the curtains, casting soft streaks across the room.
The city outside was beginning to stir, distant sounds of traffic and footsteps carrying through the quiet streets.
Inside, the atmosphere felt different from the night before. The room was filled with a calm energy, not from noise or activity, but from the shared presence of two people whose lives had intertwined in a quiet, meaningful way. She was still there, sitting near the bed, the notebook open on her lap, as she traced her fingers over the pages, lost in thought. He watched her for a moment, noticing how natural it felt to have her there, how the small gestures, the way she shifted in her seat, the faint tilt of her head, seemed to carry stories all their own.
"Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to disturb her reflection but needing to acknowledge the start of the day.
She looked up and smiled, a tired but genuine smile that seemed to light up the room. "Good morning," she replied. "I didn't expect the morning to come this quietly. It feels peaceful here."
He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant.
There was a calmness in the room that had nothing to do with the weather or the quiet streets outside. It was a calmness that came from trust, from shared experience, from the subtle awareness that they were no longer alone in their thoughts. They spent the early morning hours, slowly, almost deliberately. There was no rush to talk or to do anything. She showed him the sketches in her notebook, small drawings of the places she had visited, the moments she had remembered, the little things that others might overlook. Each sketch was accompanied by a note, a sentence or two that revealed her thoughts and emotions at the time. He listened carefully, fascinated by the insight and detail, realizing that every small observation carried a depth of understanding that few people ever noticed.
"I like how you notice things," he said at one point, pointing to a small drawing of a flower growing by the river. "It's simple, but it tells so much." She smiled softly. "I've always believed that the small things matter most."
The unnoticed moments, the little gestures, they're what make life feel alive.
He nodded, feeling the truth in her words.
He realized that her perspective, her attention to detail, was something he had unconsciously been missing. In her presence, even the ordinary felt extraordinary. As the day progressed, their conversation began to move beyond memories and observations. She spoke of the challenges she had faced over the past months, the moments when she had felt uncertain or overwhelmed. Her voice was calm, but there was a vulnerability that made him want to understand, to support, to be a part of her world.
I've been running for a while, she admitted quietly.
Not from people, but from myself, from the things I'm afraid to face. But being here, with you, it feels different, less heavy. He listened, carefully choosing his words.
I think that's what happens when you trust someone, he said.
It doesn't make the problems disappear, but it makes them lighter. Shared burdens feel smaller. She nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. Yes, exactly that. I didn't realize how much I needed someone who could just see me without judgment.
There was a pause, comfortable and unforced.
He could feel the weight of her words, the honesty in her tone, the quiet strength in her vulnerability. He understood that this moment, this quiet morning filled with conversation, observation, and reflection, was significant. It was a turning point, a moment when trust deepened, when the bond between them grew stronger not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of presence and understanding. At one point, she reached into her bag again, pulling out a small object wrapped carefully in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a delicate bracelet, simple but elegant. I was going to give this to someone else, she said softly, but I realized it belongs here, with someone who understands what it means. He took it gently, aware of the significance of her gesture. The bracelet was more than just an object. It was a symbol, a token of trust, of connection, of acknowledgement that their bond had become something meaningful. He looked at her, words caught in his throat, realizing that sometimes the most profound gestures are quiet and unassuming, yet carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken emotions. Thank you, he said finally, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I'll treasure it, not just for what it is, but for what it represents. She smiled, a small, satisfied smile that reflected relief and contentment. I knew you would understand, she replied. And that's why I'm here. The afternoon came, bringing with it the soft warmth of sunlight filtering through the windows. They moved together through simple tasks, making tea, arranging a few items in the room, tidying small corners that had been overlooked. These ordinary activities, mundane as they might seem, carried a new significance. Each action was shared, a silent acknowledgement of cooperation and companionship, a recognition that life could feel lighter when shared with someone who truly cared. At one point, she paused, glancing at the window. Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we had met differently? She asked quietly. He considered her question, feeling the depth behind it.
Sometimes, he admitted. But then I realize it doesn't matter. We're here now, and that's what counts.
The past led us to this moment, and maybe that's the only way it could have happened.
She nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. I suppose you're right.
The timing, the circumstances, everything led us here. And somehow, it feels like it was meant to be.
There was a brief silence, filled with understanding.
He realized that life had a way of bringing people together at unexpected times, creating connections that were not forced or planned, but that blossomed naturally when the moment was right. It was in these quiet, shared experiences, the laughter, the conversation, the small gestures, that trust and closeness were built. As the day faded into evening, the room was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun.
They continued to talk, exploring deeper thoughts and emotions, sharing fears, hopes, and small confessions that had remained hidden for years.
She spoke of dreams she had almost given up on, the moments of doubt that had nearly held her back, and the unexpected joys that had reminded her why it was worth trying again. He shared his own reflections, the quiet ambitions he had never spoken aloud. the lessons learned from moments of solitude and introspection. Through it all, a quiet transformation was taking place. He felt himself opening up in ways he had not anticipated, allowing her presence to influence his thoughts and feelings, encouraging a sense of connection and trust that he had longed for without fully realizing it. She, too, seemed to relax more deeply into the moment, her initial caution giving way to comfort and assurance, her vulnerability met with acceptance and respect. At one point, she laughed softly, recalling a memory from years ago. "Do you remember the night we stayed out late, watching the stars from that hill?" she asked. "We were so convinced that the world was vast and impossible, and yet we felt infinite in that moment."
He smiled, the memory vivid in his mind.
"I remember," he said, "and I remember feeling like nothing could touch us, as if time itself had paused just for us. That night taught me something important, how fleeting moments can carry immense meaning." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same understanding.
"Yes."
"And I think that's what today has been like. A moment that feels small, yet leaves a lasting impact. A moment where trust, presence, and understanding create something extraordinary." As the evening deepened, they found themselves sitting quietly side by side, the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle shadows across the room. Neither spoke for a long while, yet the silence was not empty. It was filled with the presence of two people who had shared memories, fears, dreams, and trust, creating a connection that went beyond words. She reached out, placing her hand lightly on his, a gesture of comfort, reassurance, and acknowledgement. He held her hand gently, understanding the significance of the moment. It was a bond formed not through grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but through shared experiences, mutual trust, and the quiet acceptance of vulnerability. "I'm glad I came here," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of relief and contentment. "I didn't realize how much I needed this, needed to be seen, understood, and accepted." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I'm glad you did," he replied. "Your presence, it has made a difference, more than you know. It reminds me that connection, understanding, and trust are what make life meaningful." The night grew darker, the city outside quieting as the world settled into its usual rhythm. Yet inside the room the air was filled with a sense of transformation. Two people had come together not by chance alone, but through the courage to be present, to share, and to trust. They had discovered that true closeness does not come from force or expectation, but from the willingness to be vulnerable and to accept the same in return. As she finally rested against the pillows, her hand still lightly holding his, he realized that this day, the conversations, the laughter, the shared memories, had created a turning point. It was a moment of emotional awakening, a shift that would influence not only the present, but the days to come.
And as they sat there, side by side, he understood that life's most meaningful moments often arrive quietly, unexpectedly, and without fanfare.
They are the moments where trust is offered, received, and nurtured, where connections deepen and where transformation begins. Not with dramatic gestures, but with simple acts of presence, understanding, and shared humanity. The next morning arrived with the gentle warmth of sunlight spilling through the window, brushing the room in soft shades of gold. The city outside had already begun to wake, distant sounds of cars and voices blending with the occasional chirp of birds. Inside, the room felt alive, not with noise or activity, but with a quiet, steady energy that had grown over the last few days. It was an energy born from understanding, trust, and the slow unfolding of connection that neither of them had expected, but both now cherished deeply. She stretched lightly, her eyes catching the light, and for a moment, he simply watched, appreciating the peacefulness in her movement. There was a calm confidence about her now, as if the days of hesitation and uncertainty had been replaced by a sense of belonging. He realized quietly that her presence had changed the room, the apartment, and even his own sense of space. Where once there had been only solitude, now there was companionship, gentle and sustaining.
Good morning, he said softly, his voice carrying warmth and familiarity.
She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that felt like sunlight itself.
Good morning, she replied. I slept well, thank you. I think I really needed that. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant.
Sleep, rest, and comfort were not merely physical. They were emotional. A reassurance that one's presence mattered, that one's being was accepted. The fact that she had chosen to stay, even quietly, was a gift in itself, and he felt grateful for it in ways he couldn't fully express. They spent the morning in simple companionship. He made tea while she prepared a light breakfast. The mundane tasks transformed into moments of connection. The sound of the kettle boiling, the clink of cups, the soft hum of conversation. It all carried a sense of comfort, of routine woven together in a way that felt natural and harmonious. Each small gesture was an act of care, a reminder that life could be gentle when shared with someone who truly saw you. As they sat together, eating and sipping their tea, she reached for her notebook again. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about all the moments we've shared, and how different life feels when someone notices you, really notices you."
He looked at her thoughtfully. "It's true," he said.
Life can be heavy when we carry it alone, but when someone shares it with us, even just by being present, it becomes lighter, more meaningful.
Her eyes reflected a soft understanding. "Yes, and I think that's why I'm here."
Not just for comfort, but to be part of a life where connection matters. Where it's not just about surviving the day, but noticing the beauty in small things. Together. He nodded slowly, feeling the depth of her words. It was a realization he had come to understand over the past days. Connection is not forced. It grows quietly through shared experience, empathy, and trust. Her presence had reminded him of this simple truth, one that he had long known in theory, but had only now felt fully in practice. The day unfolded gently. They moved around the apartment with a quiet ease, tidying small areas, organizing things that had been overlooked, and even laughing at minor mishaps. Each shared task became a small testament to cooperation, trust, and companionship. He noticed how natural it felt to include her in his daily life. How her suggestions, her laughter, and even her quiet observations added a new richness to the ordinary rhythm of life. At one point, she picked up a small photograph from the shelf, a memory captured in time. "Do you remember this day?" she asked, showing him the picture. He looked closely, a smile tugging at his lips. "I do," he said. "I remember how happy we felt, even though we didn't say much. It was just a perfect moment." She nodded, tracing the edge of the photo gently. "It reminds me that even small moments can matter a lot. And I think that's what our days together have been like. Simple, quiet, but full of meaning."
He smiled, feeling a sense of agreement and warmth.
Yes, life is often made of these small, shared moments, and when we notice them, when we embrace them, they become something extraordinary. The afternoon brought a different rhythm. They decided to take a walk outside, stepping into the crisp air of the city streets. The sunlight danced on the pavement, casting patterns through the trees. People passed by, caught up in their own routines, while the two of them walked side by side, sharing thoughts and observations, comfortable in silence and conversation alike. As they walked, she spoke of the things she wanted to pursue, the dreams she had almost forgotten, the small ambitions that had felt impossible. He encouraged her, listening carefully, offering insights without judgment, and sometimes simply holding space for her words to settle. In turn, he shared his own reflections, the quiet goals he had nurtured over time, and the lessons learned from moments of solitude. Their conversation was not hurried, it flowed naturally, like a river finding its course, and each word, each shared thought, deepened their bond. By the time they returned, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The room inside, now filled with the soft glow of evening light, felt even warmer, more alive, as if the day's shared experiences had imbued it with a subtle energy. They moved back into the apartment, continuing simple routines, preparing dinner together, tidying the space, and reflecting on the day's moments.
Over dinner, she spoke of gratitude, not in grandiose terms, but in a simple, heartfelt way.
I'm grateful for this, she said softly, gesturing to the space around them, for being able to share these small moments, to be understood and seen.
It's more than I expected, and I didn't realize how much I needed it.
He felt a warmth spread through him, touched by her sincerity.
I'm grateful too, he said, for your presence, your trust, and for reminding me that life's meaning often lies in the quiet moments we share. As the night approached, they settled into a comfortable routine.
She organized her belongings thoughtfully, leaving things in places that felt natural, while he adjusted small corners of the apartment to make space for her presence.
It was not about intrusion or imposition, it was about creating a shared space that reflected their connection, a space where both could feel at home.
At one point, she sat quietly by the window, looking out at the city lights. I never realized how much small gestures can matter, she said, her voice soft. A smile, a shared memory, someone noticing the little things, it changes everything. He joined her, sitting close but not too close, offering quiet companionship.
It does, he agreed.
And it reminds us that life is best lived with connection, with trust, and with the courage to be present for one another. She leaned back slightly, her expression reflective. I think that's why I stayed, she said.
Not just for comfort, but to remind myself that life is meant to be shared, that trust is powerful, and that closeness is a gift we can give and receive freely.
He nodded, feeling the weight of her words.
And you've reminded me of that too, he said.
Your presence has shown me that even quiet moments, when shared, can be transformative. They spent the rest of the evening quietly together, talking, reflecting, and simply existing in each other's presence. There was a deep sense of contentment, not from grand events, but from the realization that they had found something rare and meaningful, a connection built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. As night fell, she prepared for rest, leaving her belongings neatly arranged and her notebook open for reflection. He watched her for a moment, appreciating the quiet strength and vulnerability she carried, the way her presence had filled the apartment with warmth and life. Thank you, she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet but profound sincerity. For letting me be here, for sharing these moments, and for understanding without judgment. He smiled, reaching out to gently touch her hand. And thank you, he replied, for trusting me, for being here, and for reminding me that connection and presence are what make life meaningful. The room grew quieter as they settled in for the night.
The city outside hushed, leaving only the soft sounds of distant traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves.
Inside, the apartment was filled with a gentle warmth, a sense of completeness born not from grand gestures, but from the quiet sharing of life, trust, and understanding. In that space, they found a new rhythm. Life, once solitary and measured by quiet routines, had become richer, fuller, and brighter. Each small action, each word, each glance carried significance, creating a tapestry of moments that were simple, yet extraordinary. They had learned that closeness does not need to be forced, that trust is a gift, and that life's most meaningful experiences often arise quietly, unexpectedly, and without fanfare. And as she finally rested, her belongings close by, he realized that this chapter, though part of a longer journey, had left a lasting impact. It had shown him that life could be shared without pretense, that trust could deepen in unexpected ways, and that connection was a gift worth nurturing every day. For both of them, the presence of the other had shifted their perspective. The apartment was no longer just a space to live. It was a sanctuary, a place where vulnerability was met with understanding, where trust was honored, and where small, shared moments became the foundation of a lasting bond. As the night deepened and the world outside quieted completely, they sat together in silence, a comfortable, warm silence that spoke louder than words. In that silence, they found a sense of peace, a shared understanding, and a recognition that life's greatest treasures often come in the form of quiet moments, small gestures, and the presence of someone who truly sees you. And in that moment, they both knew that their lives had been forever changed, not by dramatic events, but by trust, presence, and the courage to allow someone into their world. A simple act, a choice to be close, and the willingness to share life's small moments had created something enduring, meaningful, and profoundly beautiful.